right, welcome everybody to this month's episode of Cronin's Corner. Thank you so much for joining us. It is my privilege, and I'm so excited today to be joined by my colleague in the Massachusetts State Senate and friend, Eric Lesser. So, Eric,
hey,
welcome.
Thanks for having me on Cronin's Corner, John. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the warm welcome to Fitchburg.
They say nobody's anybody until they make it on Fitchburg Access Television and Cronin's Corner.
I'm in the hot seat. I gotta make sure
we're fourth
I'm
or
on my
fifth
best.
in the ratings right now, but I think
keeps you hungry. You got to get that Nielsen bump up. But you don't want to be number one. You want to be number 2, 3. That's
right.
The key.
Yeah. Otherwise, you get lazy. But thank you so much for coming today. How was the drive?
It was good. We got hit a little traffic in Worcester, but honestly, for me, it's a relief to come to Fitchburg rather than go all the way into the State House into Boston, because I'm of course coming from the Springfield area. So
right.
it was a good. We hit a little bit of a snag in Worcester, but mostly smooth sailing.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to spend the day today with you in Fitchburg. Wanted to start out by just talking a little bit about your background. So you were a young guy who got elected to the state senate. I don't think there's a typical path to the state senate. Everybody comes from kind of a diverse background and brings diverse experiences. But where did you grow up? And then what led you to run for elected office the first time?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, John, and hello to everybody who's watching. And actually, don't hold it against me. I actually wasn't born in Massachusetts. I was born in Queens, New York.
Not a Yankee fan.
Right? We were Mets fans in Queens,
okay.
But my first baseball game ever was Shea Stadium with my uncle.
Gotcha.
But my dad grew up in the Sheepshead Bay housing projects in southern Brooklyn. A lot of the people he grew up with were immigrants, mostly Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. My mom's family, Joan Granucci was her maiden name. She grew up in a third-floor walk-up apartment in New York's Little Italy. She shared a bed, not a bedroom, a bed, with her grandmother until she moved out when she was an adult.
Wow.
My parents met at City College in New York, which was described at the time as the working man's or working women's Harvard. They attended school for $54 a semester. I moved with my family, of course, when I was 7.
That was in the 60s?
Yeah, I mean, this is an important point. This
70s?
Wasn't that long ago.
Right, yeah.
It was late 60s, early 70s.
Right,
yeah, exactly. And actually, the reason that's actually important to point out, John, is even adjusted for inflation, and it wasn't that long ago, we ask young people to pay a lot more than $54 a semester to go to public school,
right.
to go to community college, to go to state college. Fitchburg State costs a lot more
sure.
than the equivalent of what $54 a semester was back in the 70s. So it's important for people to keep in mind when we talk about ideas like affordable school, student loan help, or even free community college or free college. These weren't abstract concepts for a previous generation. In
right.
fact, a lot of people coming off the GI Bill, baby boomers, benefited from essentially free school.
Absolutely.
To get their start. So anyway, we moved up to Western Mass because at the time that's where the jobs were and that's where the opportunity was for my family.
Yeah.
And the first time I ever got involved in politics, I was 16. And the principal at my high school, Longmeadow High School in Longmeadow, Mass, called an assembly, brought us all into the auditorium, lined a whole bunch of teachers up at the front of the room, and told us that they weren't coming back next year because of budget cuts that were made in the building you and I now work in.
Yeah.
And I remember, John, sitting there and feeling really angry that 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds should have to pay the price for bad decisions,
right.
frankly, that had been made somewhere else. I think in North Central Mass and Fitchburg, you, like we do in Western Mass, understand what it feels like to be invisible from the decision makers on Beacon Hill.
And you know what we say too is like we feel things differently than the people who live in Greater Boston feel, right? Like we feel the booms last and the bust first,
right?
And we feel the brunt of bad decisions.
Yep,
yeah.
Exactly. So kind of make a little bit of a long story short, I have a memory of sitting in the town hall the night of that vote as the clerk was counting the ballots, and I was sitting there and a woman was sitting next to me who was clutching a pink slip, watching these votes getting counted. And when the clerk announced that the vote had passed, she literally ripped the pink slip up and threw it in the garbage because it meant her job had been saved. And I felt grateful, John, for that because it was an early lesson for me that despite the messiness and the frustrations of politics, it really is one of the most powerful ways to make a difference. And so from there I caught the bug and I got wrapped up in the campaign of this skinny guy with a funny name from Illinois, Barack Obama. My big break for him at the time was carrying his suitcases all around New Hampshire during the first in the nation primary. So that was a lot of fun, a wild campaign to be a part of.
What are some of your favorite memories from that campaign? So, I mean, you were just out of college, right? This was your first gig out of college. What was it like to just be around? I mean, that was a very exciting presidential campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of very distinct memories, especially from that early phase back in New Hampshire when really very few people knew who Senator Obama was at the time. And politics has changed so much even just from then. It was just before iPhones. It was just
Twitter didn't matter.
Exactly.
Right? Facebook didn't matter.
Social media was just starting.
Yeah.
He had a YouTube account. He had an email program, of course, but you didn't have the same round-the-clock kind of surveillance of the iPhones and so really a big premium was spent on getting him into living rooms, walking him through diners. I remember visiting the Tumble Inn Diner in Claremont, New Hampshire with him and really taking the time, going table by table, sitting and talking with people. I remember we did a house party in Bedford, New Hampshire, which is a town right outside Manchester, and there were maybe 30 people in a backyard, and that was a good use of his time.
Right.
And he sat and he listened to people and heard folks out. The other thing I noted about his leadership style is, and I traveled with him after the New Hampshire primary. I traveled on the plane with him through 47 states and 6 countries, over 200,000 miles. I was there, I was actually handling the luggage and doing the logistics outside, but I was there for his speech on race in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, was there for the debates, was there for the convention. Through all of the challenges that he went through, and frankly all the mud that was thrown at him, never once saw him raise his voice, never once saw him lose his temper. I can't say the same about myself when I'm in stressful situations.
Do you think that's prepared you to run a statewide campaign now, though? I mean, the slog has got to be similar. It is day in and day out. It's different now. I mean, again, there's more eyes and ears with the advent of iPhones.
Well, I think a statewide campaign is a totally different ball of wax, obviously than a presidential campaign, but also than a state senate campaign. I think there's definitely parts that are not so fun, but what I've really enjoyed about the campaign so far is meeting people and learning about the different regions. And actually, one of my big takeaways is the regions really are more similar than they are different. And we've had a set of policies in our state, frankly, in a form of politics that has tried to pit regions against each other, right? Boston versus Western Mass, Central Mass versus, North Central Mass. And one of the things I'm trying to get across to people is we've actually got to leverage and unite our state so that the regions are working in concert with each other. So for example, a lot of people focus on the Fitchburg-Boston connection, through the commuter rail, which is, of course, essential. But what about the Fitchburg-Worcester connection? You've got all these life sciences companies now coming into Worcester. Let's think imaginatively about how we link those corridors. Or even, Fitchburg along, Route 2 into the Berkshires and through Franklin County. There's an effort underway to get a rail link going there. So just thinking creatively about how we link regions, how we link different gateway cities, and really try to bring the best out in
and there's no simple solution to it. There's no silver bullet. I mean, it requires thinking about housing differently. It requires thinking about transportation differently, workforce development and pathways from those life science careers. And making sure that we're building up that workforce if we want those industries to come here.
Exactly.
So I want to make sure we talk about your work in the Gateway City Caucus, which you're the chair of. But just to return to that experience in 2008 and your work in the Obama administration early on, what was it like winning? I mean, what is it like being a part of the team that wins a presidential election? And then if that was your first job, I mean, your second job was working 50 or 100 feet from the Oval Office. But what was that experience like?
Well, I'll tell you, a presidential campaign, if it's going well, you do feel like you're floating almost in terms of, in my job I was sort of like the mom on the big family vacation. Like
if things are going well, you don't have 30 people in the backyard barbecue for very long.
Exactly. My job, not to overstate it, I was in charge of all the suitcases, the luggage, the logistics, but I took it very seriously. immensely, and I give President Obama a lot of credit because he created a culture on his team that nobody was above anything, and you know, he would grab his luggage just like everybody else, and also the senior management, David Plouffe, David Axelrod, Valerie Jarrett, they really created a culture of every single person from the baggage handler to the top advisor is part of the same team. And I took it personally because one of the things I felt was we traveled with about 30 or 40 reporters. So it was like a family vacation from, you know, your worst nightmare. You had the candidate, you had his team and staff, then we had about 40 or so reporters, CNN, ABC, NBC, New York Times, USA Today, Associated Press, you name it, we're all there. But one of the things I kind of felt to myself is, hey, you know, if these reporters don't get their bags delivered back to their room, they're going to be pretty cranky, and they're not going to write good stories. So like, I thought it was like a pretty important role. And I remember being in Grant Park the night of the election, and the vote being announced right at 11 p.m. and just the pure, overwhelming sense of emotion.
I remember watching that on TV. I was 18, I think. Yeah,
and history. And I'll give you just one kind of anecdote. You're a military guy, so you can appreciate the stakes of this. He of course had a lot of Secret Service protection as a candidate, but I remember shortly after the official announcement happened, kind of like a cavalcade. I don't even know where they came from, of sort of like
they were there
SWAT.
The whole time,
they were there the whole time, but of sort of SWAT folks and like extra Secret Service and like just immediately cocooned and sort of enveloped
and life will never
the
be
stage,
the same,
and like, and certainly for him and his family, things were never the same. But.
One of the things that I find fascinating about your career and some of the incredible experiences you've had was also your work on Veep as a producer, right?
Yep.
Or an advisor?
Consultant.
Consultant.
Yeah.
Okay. What was that like?
Yeah, so to kind of fast forward, so after the election, I went to work for David Axelrod, who was the president's senior advisor. And as you mentioned, I had a little kind of cubbyhole office about 40 feet.
Nobody asked how big it was,
yeah, from the front door of the, it's a little bit like having a Manhattan real estate. It's just location.
It's location.
So so I worked there for 2.5 years. Was there for the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Worked closely with Elizabeth Ward and her team on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I then went to work at the Council of Economic Advisors in the response to the Great Recession, working on economic policy issues and budget and fiscal issues for the federal government, and came home back to Massachusetts and frankly fell out of my lap. A close friend of mine who had been doing work for HBO, she called me and she said that there was this new show being created and they were looking for help with the kind of accuracy and the feel and the flow, and would I be willing to kind of help out the writers and the producers.
How long did you have to think about it when that call came in?
Well, honestly, like, it kind of threw me for a loop. I was registering for classes for law school.
Gotcha.
when she called, and I was on my cell phone in line waiting to register for classes, and I was like, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I said, sure.
Right.
And it was really a lot of fun. And I have a memory, I used to read the scripts in the library, in the law school library, and it's a very staid environment. Everyone's got their head in their books.
And you're breaking up laughing?
I would explode laughing, and people would kind of look at me and like, that guy's definitely not reading law books right now.
Did you get to go on set and kind of meet some of the actors? And that must have been fun.
Yeah, that was a great. So for the first 4 seasons or so, they filmed and the show in just outside Baltimore in Howard County, Maryland. So that was pretty easy to get to. I have relatives actually in Maryland. My in-laws live in Maryland, nice. So I was able to get down there actually quite a bit. They then moved the production to Santa Monica, to California. That was a little harder, but I did go out to the set for for their filming in California as well.
Yeah.
And people don't appreciate this. What a big project filming a television series like this. Hundreds of people.
Right,
I mean, you're talking about lighting, costume design, set design. I mean, they have entire construction crews that are building the sets, maintaining the scenes.
And we've actually felt a little bit of that in North Central. We've got New England Studios at Devon's.
Of course.
So actually, the film industry is a big part of our regional economy.
Yeah.
because they show up, and when they show up with cash. And they're paying vendors, and they need to feed 300 people, or they need to set designed and built in 24 hours. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's sort of multifaceted because so many of the people are coming from other places, right? So then you're filling hotel rooms, you're filling restaurants, you're getting taxi cabs, like drivers and shuttle companies, and it's really kind of it really encompasses a whole economy that's pretty dramatic.
Right.
So that's cool.
So let's pivot now to your work and kind of your path to the state senate. So again, we're similar. We ran campaigns as law students. I don't know if I'd recommend that to.
It's a lot to juggle.
It's a lot to juggle. But we were both successful. What was taking your experience from the Obama administration and as a law student, and then entering the Massachusetts State Senate, and you represent a district that is a lot like the district I represent. It's gateway cities, but it's diverse. It also has rural communities and populations, and so there's really a diverse set of challenges.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you asking. First, John, I should thank you for your service, and it's been a lot of fun working with you. And you've done a great job. You've hit the ground running in the Senate. We've partnered on a lot of initiatives, and I really appreciate it. And I admire the service you've given our country in Iraq, in the military. You're West Point grad,
thank you.
I really admire you a lot. So I was part of the reason I came home to Massachusetts was because President Obama told us to. He said to his young aides, if you were frustrated with how things were going or you wanted to see change in your communities, grab a clipboard and go home and run. And so that's what I did. I moved my family home. And I got into an intense 5-way Democratic primary back in 2014.
Right?
Absolutely, those are fun. And ultimately won by 192 votes. So I take voting rights very seriously because if you win by 192 votes, no one can tell me that their vote doesn't count.
No, I think about this all the time. I won by 1%. And it's every door, every phone call.
Every absentee ballot, every mail-in ballot.
All of it matters. All of it matters, especially in that first race.
Yeah, absolutely. So then for the last 8 years, really, I've been working on a set of issues, vital for both of our regions and frankly for our whole state. I come from a very diverse area for people who aren't familiar with the greater Springfield area. I represent 2 gateway cities, Springfield and Chicopee, as well as a town without a stoplight. I have some of the densest urban communities in the state, and I have some of the most rural. I have a Fortune 50 financial services company in my district, Mass Mutual, and I have dozens of machine shops and factories and small businesses that dot the Ludlow and Chicopee rivers. I've got traditional farming communities. I've got one of the largest military bases in New England, Westover Air Force Reserve Base. But one of the things I've really found ties all of those different types of communities together, actually, is a belief that they're proud of Massachusetts and proud to live in a place like Massachusetts, but a feeling that life is just getting too hard here. The cost of living is going up. Rents are skyrocketing. Springfield saw double-digit increases in its rents in the last 2 years since COVID. You've seen just, incredibly outdated transportation that's leaving communities isolated and cut off from where the job and growth centers are. And shame on us, right? Because we've got a lot of assets in this state. We've got things here that most other places could only dream of having. The challenge, I think, for our next governor, our next lieutenant governor, our next kind of executive team is going to be how do we take this dynamism, this energy we've got in our state and include more communities. And that's really what my campaign for lieutenant governor is all about. It's what my time in the legislature and in the Senate has been all about.
And I think, I drive into Boston 2 or 3 times a week to go to the State House, as do you. And there are cranes everywhere, right? The city is booming, the life sciences and biotech industry is booming. How do we in North Central Massachusetts, how do we in Springfield be a part of that boom and make sure that that everybody is sharing in a dynamic economy?
No, it's such a good question, John. There's a few things. One, absolutely urgent issue, which is a frankly low-hanging fruit in terms of how we can get it resolved, is vocational education and manufacturing policy. I know how important this is in North Central Mass. I know how important it is to you. I chair our manufacturing caucus in the Senate. My co-chair, Jeff Roy, is a great partner. He's from Milford. He lives in Franklin, but he's in the Milford-Franklin area. So just a couple things. We have right now waiting lists at almost every single one of our vocational schools in the state.
Right.
At the same time, we have employers desperate to hire people. These are good jobs. These are high-tech jobs. That's something that I think a lot of people in the public don't appreciate.
Right.
Precision machining, making the components for wind turbines, making the components for advanced batteries.
3D printing.
3D
additive
printing.
manufacturing.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, we can't reach our climate goals, for example, if we don't have the electricians to install the solar panels.
Right.
We're never going to be able to get to our net zero goals if we don't have carpenters and skilled masons to repair the roofs and replace the windows and improve the insulation, HVAC folks to fix the boilers and the ventilation and the ductworks in buildings to make sure we're more efficient. So we have got to right now surge resources to our voc schools, get the waiting list closed, and build out dramatically more capacity around job training.
And I think there's a bipartisan consensus that that is one of the best investments that we can make, right?
Absolutely.
Investing in young people and making sure that they have the skills to join our workforce, which is desperate for help,
right,
and also enter the middle class.
Yeah, and that is the most important point you just brought up. Look, there's a lot of talk about income inequality
Right.
and what we need to do to close wealth gaps. You can't have a serious conversation about this without manufacturing. That was the engine in our country for absorbing and bringing immigrants in.
Yep.
My grandfather, tool and die maker, he had a high school education. He was able to support a family of 5 in Brooklyn, New York as a tool and die maker at a local factory. My grandfather on my mother's side, a longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront, skilled trade, supported a family of 5. Allowed his kids to go to college off of that income. Manufacturing has been the engine of mobility in our country. For too long, it's locked too many people out. There aren't enough women in the
Yep.
trades. There aren't enough women with enough entry points into our voc programs. There haven't been enough minorities represented or disadvantaged communities included. But we got to fix that, and then we've got to emphasize that pathway for people.
Right.
Look, anybody who's had to call a plumber or an electrician
They
recently
know, right?
knows
They know viscerally that we need
how
more of these
yeah,
people.
how
right?
much, how
Yeah.
in demand, and how much money you can make.
Right. Great
So.
careers. All right. So the other huge issue in North Central, in Boston, in Springfield is housing.
Yes.
One of the big challenges that we face in our gateway cities, and specifically in our downtowns in Fitchburg and Leominster, is that developers will come here and it costs them the same for labor, it costs them the same for supplies, it costs them the same for permits and drawing up designs to build housing units in Leominster as it does in Dorchester or East Boston. So because the market rate rents are so much higher, closer to
Exactly.
Boston, they just don't come here. And so we have a huge issue with supply. So as our next lieutenant governor,
Yeah.
how do we solve that?
And by the way, that hurts both corners, right? It's obviously bad for Fitchburg because it diminishes the availability and the quality of the housing stock.
Right.
It's also bad for Boston because it means that there's less space and places
Correct.
for people to live, which contributes to the gentrification, contributes to the skyrocketing housing crisis you've seen in Boston. I mean, we are a few years away. We already are experiencing a pronounced homelessness crisis,
Right.
but we are just a few years away from what you've seen in San Francisco, which is out of control homelessness. People cannot afford to live in this state. It is too expensive. So just a couple of things on that. We have to dramatically expand the HDIP program, which I've been a champion of in the Gateway Cities Caucus,
Absolutely.
as have you, John. This is a program that helps incentivize development and housing production in our gateway cities for exactly the reasons you pointed out. Look, the developers are crowding in to do everything they can to build more housing in Boston, and then they're flipping around and they're charging these outrageous rents to people that regular people can't afford in Boston.
Right.
We've got to change the orientation so that there's production and there's new housing opening in Lawrence, in Fall River, in Fitchburg, in Worcester, in Pittsfield, in North Adams, in Holyoke. And we've got to make sure that it's connected by good transit. I mean, think about the potential in Fitchburg.
Yeah.
If we make the improvements to the commuter rail, if we get that trip a little bit shorter, a little bit faster, more reliable, and more comfortable, retrofit the trains a little bit better, make them a little bit
Make the
easier to
Wi-Fi
work, make the
accessible.
Wi-Fi
Right.
work. Think about, you combine that with retrofitting the old mills, creating good, new, high-quality housing for people. this is a community in a region that is gorgeous. You have the college, you have the university here, you've got the museum, you've got beautiful natural scenery all around you. You're close to Boston if you need to get to Boston for meetings or a couple days a week for work. You can also get to Worcester, you can get to Western Mass, you can get to New York easily from here. So we've got to do more around production of new housing and connecting that housing to transit, which is why one of the signature things I've been working on for 8 years is connecting our state by high-speed rail. From Pittsfield through Springfield through Worcester to Boston. We'll maybe do a spur to Fitchburg. But why should people even in Fitchburg care about a project like this? Well, first of all, it would take thousands of cars off the road. It would be the single biggest reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in our state's history, cleaning our air. It would create, to our point just now, thousands and thousands of units of new housing. Good transit-oriented development that people can afford. It will reduce the pressure on the escalating rents, so it will allow people to afford good places to live. And it's going to create thousands and thousands of good jobs in areas of our state that have been left out.
And neglected, right?
Yeah, been left out of the high tech and the life sciences boom you've seen in certain parts of the Metro Boston area.
So much of the conversations that we have, and I know your work as the chair of the Gateway Cities Caucus is setting the conditions for economic growth and economic opportunity, and making sure that people who maybe leave, who grow up in Longmeadow or grow up in Lunenburg like I did, who leave, are able to come back to places that are growing and prosperous and that have attractive downtowns. If you are our next lieutenant governor, and I'm proud to be supporting you in that endeavor, what do you hope that you can accomplish, and what are you going to bring from living and advocating communities outside the 495 bubble to the corner office?
So look, I plan to be just as much of a champion for our communities in Boston, and frankly, we have a lot of neighborhoods in Boston that have been as neglected as communities, that have been as neglected as communities in Fitchburg or Springfield have been. So I think one of the pieces of the perspective I bring is I'm going to be somebody that's working to unite our state, because we, as I said earlier, we have immense assets here. We've got some of the smartest people in the world. We have some of the most path-breaking, innovative companies. We've got incredible assets. We've got a gorgeous coastline. We have beautiful, open
MIT,
spaces.
Harvard,
we have MIT. We have Harvard. We have everything. But the problem is that we've got skyrocketing inequality, and it's not being shared by enough people and in enough places because of these impediments: the transportation, the housing issues, the structural inequalities that have kind of been baked into our state for a long time. I'm going to be a lieutenant governor that widens the aperture a bit and says, you know what, we've got all these different communities, all these different regions of our state that could be working together in common purpose to get this done. And I'm a jobs and infrastructure guy. I want shovels in the ground. I want to see the MBTA get recapitalized and the lines get fixed. The new train cars are made in Springfield.
I didn't know
so
that.
I drive by the factory every single day almost where they make the new rail cars. I want to see that expansion of East-West Rail. I want to see improvements to that Fitchburg line. We have a historic opportunity in front of us, John. $9 billion is going to be coming to Massachusetts from the Biden infrastructure plan alone. I'm going to be laser focused on getting that money into our communities, getting hard hats into those projects, because that's going to unlock opportunity. That's going to unlock jobs for people.
And so many of those decisions are going to be made by our next governor and lieutenant governor, so I'm proud to be supporting you. And know you're going to do a great job, and not forget about us here in North Central Massachusetts. One last question. So you're a father of 3, you're married, you've got a day job in the state Senate, you've got another full-time job running for lieutenant governor. Are you sleeping at all? And you've got a baby at home,
I do
right?
have a baby
David
at
is
home,
what, 9 months now?
He's about to turn 1. In
Okay.
April he turns 1. So luckily, knock on wood, he's been a good sleeper, which is I should not have said that because that's gonna jinx it. But he's been great. I've got 3 kids. My daughter Rose, she's 8. She's in 3rd grade. My second daughter Nora, she's 5. She's going to start kindergarten in the fall.
I think they're both old enough to campaign and hit the doors, I think, right?
Absolutely. It's a family effort. And my wife has got a big, busy career of her own. She's an attorney in private practice in the Springfield area. And, just for the young parents that are out there, that's another perspective I bring.
Absolutely.
You know, we don't have a lot of young parents in high positions in government right now. We've seen with Mayor Wu, Michelle Wu, the difference it makes to see, you know, a millennial parent, a millennial mom, kind of balancing all the different things.
You can do it well, though.
Absolutely,
right?
and you know, and my wife and I have struggled with the issues around childcare and balancing it all, just like everyone. Right now, our childcare bill is more than our mortgage, which is what a lot of families face in our state. So, you know, we just need, I think, a fresh pair of eyes on things. We need some new energy, some new ideas, you know, brought to bear, and then the sky's the limit for our state.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to spend the rest of the day with you in Fitchburg and talk about North Central, and wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thanks for having me, John. Thank you for your support.
You bet.